So, all right, I think everyone's in. Are we all ready to go? All good to go? Think so. Well, thank you everyone for giving us the time. I know everyone's extremely busy in these times, so I really appreciate everyone coming on board. So what I wanted to do is just share a little bit from the Mindful perspective. So Mindful was a business consultancy that's been in business for over 25 years, mainly specializing in TM1 planning analytics. So we've had a long journey with TM1 planning analytics, how it's evolved over the years. And part of our history was all the clients asking for documentation. None of the consultants want to do it. So we came up with the idea of QUBEdocs, and QUBEdocs got born a few years ago and have evolved over the years. But especially in the last 2 years with COVID, what has happened is, I'm sure all of you are aware, people have been staying home. It's been very difficult to keep funneling, keep creating consulting work for our consultants. Selling new business very difficult. So what was happening is we started using QUBEdocs as a vehicle to have a look at a customer's model, call the customer up, say, can I have a chat to you? I've just looked at your model. Here's the documentation. Let me run through a few things I'm concerned with. I'm looking at the log files. It seems to drag a little bit. I'm looking at, licenses. It looks you got too many admin there. You only licensed for 5. I can see 6. Let's get that resolved. So what the consulting team did is use QUBEdocs every single month with a customer to give them insights into their model, have a look at some health check. And what it did for us, it created consulting work for us, consistent consulting work. And the clients loved it. The clients loved the idea of you being proactive, looking at the model, engaging with them. And it gave a new way of engaging with the customer. So today on the call, I've got the fabulous Raksha, who was one of our principal consultants and has done really well at using QUBEdocs to create some consulting work. And it also saves a lot of time for the consultants doing that work they don't want to do. So I'm Belinda Johnson. I'm one of the directors at QUBEdocs and also used to be CEO of Mindful, and then we sold it. So I'm going to pass over to Raksha and just ask her a few questions before she takes you guys through a technical session of how you use QUBEdocs to put together an insights report for yourself. So Raksha, just tell me a little bit, COVID, what did you do with QUBEdocs? How did you use it?
I think it has been, I think all of us have gone through a difficult time since last year. And then I think last year, sometime probably during the same time, April or May, COVID hit us. Probably it was the first time that happened. All of us panicked. And I think we kind of gradually saw that projects are going on hold, consultants are not getting work. Anyway, think people are demotivated. We've been demotivated. And then we brainstormed and came up with this fantastic idea. Okay, how about we go back to our clients and then check what we've done in their model? Because I think every time we do a project, it's always that we don't finish everything. There could be budget constraints, there could be time constraints, there could be resource constraints, and there's always something or the other which you leave behind in the model. It could be something as tiny as you've just not cleaned up a few objects or cleaned up a few rules. So we kind of thought, let's go back to the clients and then let's see what we've done in our models. Let's review the models. And the challenge which was there in front of us was it is just not the models which we've built. It could be some other consultants who've built the model, and now we have to get into a completely new environment, gain the trust of that client, review their model, and then probably tell them, hey, Mr. Client, these are the few things which we probably missed during our last project, but how about we do it now? So I think the best way which we could do it was using QUBEdocs, because QUBEdocs became a platform where we could easily get into someone's environment and review their model, irrespective of whether you've probably been a developer or a consultant in that project. Now, to be honest, and I have to confess over here, I think QUBEdocs had been in the business for a very long time, but I had personally not used it much because being a consultant, being an expert in the TM1 world, I'm always overconfident that I know everything. I can get into the background and do things. But then my experience has turned the moment I've started using QUBEdocs because things become so fast. I mean, I can always go back into the servers, go back into the models, spend my time and get things done. But then if you have a platform where, you just get a documentation on the fly, you just get some best practices on the fly, which is so much faster than going into each rule and each TI process and each cube and trying to find out what the model does. So that has been our experience. That's how we started using QUBEdocs onto our clients. Doing health checks, I think we almost probably did 20 or 30, or I probably think even more than that. I don't remember. At least I personally did around 10 or 15 of the health checks. Um, it's not that work started coming up instantly, but I can still tell you that from the health checks which we've done in the past, we still getting work, because not everyone said, okay, let's do the work now. But then things got parked, and then we still deriving work from what we had done in the past.
Thank you so much, Raksha. That's so true. I had a meeting with a customer the other week, and she still had her QUBEdocs report, and she said, I know, Belinda, we need to start with this, so we need to." So it gives a great conversation, and it gets a roadmap. When you go through that, it puts a roadmap of consulting services that the customer should do, and so it's just a matter of getting that together and doing that. Now, Ross, maybe I'll put you on the spot. A snapshot. How easy is it to take that first snapshot of the model? Just take us through just what you need to have and how easy it is to do.
Sure, no problem. And apologies, I'm fighting off a cold over here, so I'm just going to leave my video off and not subject you to that. But as far as getting the snapshot, it's quite literally a click of a couple of buttons. Depending on the size of your model, you can be looking at your documentation in 10, 15 minutes, less than an hour for sure, from initial install to looking at your first documentation. So it's very quick and easy.
Excellent. Fantastic. Right. So hopefully all of you guys are sure have seen QUBEdocs before. So we're not going to do a demo today. We're just assuming that you've seen it and you know what a great product it is. So what we want to do is we want to give you guys some advice, tips and tricks around I call it an insights report, but I feel free to call it whatever you guys want to call it. Make it your own. Take what we're going to train you in today to put your own flavor on it, put your own things in it, create. One of my business partners have taken it and they've taken their health check and they've merged it together and they've created this fantastic collateral for their customers and their own brand. So we want to support you. And with being part of a managed services engagement, it's easier for you to just embed QUBEdocs into your managed service as opposed to selling new software, which is always hard. So what we did at Mindful is we would, once the clients have done a few of these insight report, they said, oh, can you please do this every month? So what we would do is we say, okay, every month we do managed services. So we do these sorts of services. And part of that is this health check or this QUBEdocs report. But we just embedded in our managed services. So the customer didn't know they were buying QUBEdocs or that. It was just part of the service we delivered every month. And the clients loved it. We had a client a few days ago that said, and Ross is part of it, said, oh, I don't need QUBEdocs. I know we've got a small model. We know everything. And she said, we only have 3 cubes. And Ross said, well, actually, you've got 5 cubes. I just quickly had created a snapshot and you got 5 cubes. She said, what? And the technical guy came on and said, yes, we have these other cubes as well. So, even if you think you know your model, there's always these things that come out. Just before I hand over to Raksha to take us through just a few things, remember we're only accessing metadata. So we don't go in and look at data and information. It's just the metadata. So that should also be good for your customers when they're concerned about security and connectivity. We don't actually access that. It's just the metadata. And it's cloud-based. You can do on-prem, but cloud's the way forward. Everyone's on that. So it's really easy to use, really simple to use to get this done. So before I steal all of the time, I can natter on a little bit. Raksha, can I pass over to you and just take these guys through how, what they should do and look at, if that's okay?
Perfect. Thanks, Belinda. So, guys, disclaimer here: I'm not a QUBEdocs expert, but I'll kind of just show you how I've been using QUBEdocs over the last 1.5 years now, and I think it works really well. So, I'm going to just show you what I've been doing in the system, how I do my health checks, how I look at QUBEdocs when I do some trainings, and all of that. So, I'm going to share my screen. Just confirming, can you see my screen? It's the QUBEdocs model documentation.
I can.
Perfect.
Ross, can you see it?
I think it'll be fine.
Yes, assuming I can find my mute button. Yes, I can see it. Sorry.
In case you all have any questions, probably just put it in the chat box, and then Belinda and Ross, you all could direct me if there's any question that comes up. So starting with QUBEdocs, I think all of y'all might be familiar with this QUBEdocs page and how y'all create a new instance. Even if you're not, I think there is a very good documentation out here whenever you want to set up a TM1 server. One thing, and probably this is just a trick, when we initially started doing QUBEdocs, um, a few of our clients already had QUBEdocs. A few of our clients were on the cloud version of planning analytics, and then setting up QUBEdocs was very easy. But then for a few of our clients who were on-prem, we had to literally install the QUBEdocs files onto their server, take a restart of that server. So that takes a little bit of time because you need permission from the clients to get things done. So maybe be a little mindful around it while you're do it. So once you all have set this up, all you have to do is click on the documentation, and I've already clicked over here and I've kept it ready for us. Now, whenever we do a health check, we could do a lot more things, but there are three basic things which I look at. A, I need to understand what's happening in the model. B, I need to understand what are the issues in the model. What are the best? Have we followed the best practices? Are we compliant with the licenses? How are the log files looking at? So, all those technical pieces. And then the third thing is presenting that documentation. Now, besides that, there could be many other things that, you need to understand the roadmap of the client. You need to understand the client's perspective, but that's qualitative and that's beyond the technical setup. So in QUBEdocs, I effectively look at three things. One, what is the model doing? B, all the best practices around that model, and C, how do I present that documentation? So the first part, which I'm going to look at, is understanding what the model is doing. So over here, you would see a model, which what this does is it gives you a flow diagram of all the cubes and how the data has been flowing in the cubes. Now, I must admit, all my clients get so fascinated after seeing this diagram. Even I like it personally, but I think every health check or every time I show my client this, they really like it, as if they've never seen this in the past, as if they don't know their cubes. But I think most of my clients do get excited about it. Now, over here, so this is the summary flow. And effectively, if I look at all the cubes, I can understand that this is a basic financial model where I'm doing my revenue planning out here. I'm doing my expense planning out here. I've got some cargo cubes, some CapEx cubes, and that flows into my profit and loss and my financials, which probably would be my balance sheet cash flow. And then I've got some reporting, which happens over here. Now, I can also narrow down it further, and I can see how the rules and processes flow in between the cubes. So if you look at this black arrow, that means two cubes are linked via rules. If you look at the blue arrow, that means the cubes are linked via a process. And then this green thing, this is the rule link, which I assume we have this in performance modelers. I'm assuming it is that, but personally I've not used it much. But then over here, what I see from this particular chart is this is a financial cube. I have got rules which link my cubes. I've got processes which link my cube. And I can exactly identify which are the cubes which are linked by rules and which are the cubes which are linked by processes. Now I can also click on each of the cubes further. And then let's just wait for it to open the other screen. And then this exactly tells me what database is used to load the data in the cube and which are the immediate cubes which feed into my financial cube. And then and then from the financial cube, I've got some information going into reporting on which probably I do some reporting. I can also go into each one of the other tabs, which tells me that in my financial cube, I've got these dimensions. These are all the possible rules out here, which are the different processes which feed into my cube, and then the views and the properties. I don't really see this a lot, but then what is very important, which I kind of see, is what are the different processes, what sort of rules are there in the system, and then how the data flows from one cube to another cube, because this gives me a fair bit of idea that what are the dependencies, what is the model doing, and what is the data flow. Any questions so far? I'm assuming
None have come in through the chat yet.
Perfect. Then the next step is understanding the cubes. I'll probably minimize my window here. So why I always go through this tab is, especially for the clients who've had QUBEdocs, I have kind of seen a few of my clients who've put descriptions across each of these cubes, and that gets really handy when you're doing a health check. You can also add descriptions out here. So I think you just need to come over here and edit tags, and then you can kind of come in and put some description out here that this is capex, maybe loads from data warehouse. You can put in your description out over here. And in the past, I think I've at least had 3 or 4 clients who had put in a lot of descriptions, and that was really helpful when I was doing the health check. So that is one of the main reasons why I come onto this tab every time and try and understand what each cube does. Of course, I can always click into this, and then it takes me back to the previous page where it gives me the data flow of the cube, and what feeds into the cube and what feeds out of the cube. So it takes me back to that on the previous page. So that's around cubes. Then I go around dimensions. Now, this is a very interesting screen, and I really like this screen. So again, what this dimension page does is, you can add your descriptions, and then if there are any descriptions which are already in there, you can always review those descriptions to get some more information around that particular dimension. But something which I really like about this is, what the screen tells me is whether this dimension is updated by a process or whether this dimension is manually updated. Now, where this gets helpful is, for example, at times you'll have a lot of support tickets, or at times whenever I do a health check, I always go to my help desk and I kind of see what are the common tickets which the clients have raised. And at that point in time, someone is going to say this dimension is not updated, the data for this particular element has not got loaded, for example. So this gives me a clear view of whether that dimension is being maintained manually, whether it gets automated via a process. And this gives me a straightforward view of all my dimensions in the system. So I always go to the screen and see what is connected from where. I can, again, as a fundamental rule, you can always click into any of these dimensions. I'll probably pick up a good one, something like maybe entity. Yeah, so you can always get into the dimensions, see what sort of attributes are there. You can see which all cubes this particular dimension is associated with it, because at times it can happen that you have a dimension in the system which might be redundant. It is not associated with any cube. So this gives you a fair bit of idea of whether this dimension is associated in any cube or whether it's just a standalone dimension, for example. Then I can go into my processes. So over here in the processes, what this tells me is whether this process is loaded from a CSV file, whether it is loaded from a ODBC data source, or whether probably it's a generic process which does not have any data source. I think we have a lot of those processes, or whether it comes from a cube. So it gives me all the information about what is the source of the process, and then you can also add description around what that process does. You can always click into this process, and then it tells you, it tells you which cube it feeds to, what is the data source which it is fed from. You can go into the details, look at the script of the process out here if you wish to. And then also if there is any data source query, that will also get listed out here. Any questions so far?
None yet, Raksha.
Okay, all good. And then you have the chores. I think I really like the screen because I failed to get it in TM1 or planning analytics, especially in architect. So what this tells me is these are all my chores, whether these chores are scheduled or they're not scheduled, and at what time are they scheduled and how frequent do they run. So is it a daily load? Is it a monthly load? Is it in a day it probably loads every 30 minutes? So it gives me a fair bit of idea of what are the chores which are running in the system and what are the chores which are impacting which processes. So I can always click into any of my processes, and then it effectively tells me which scenario it runs from, what does that process do, which are in the chore, what are the processes which are linked. And you can always click on the processes and it gives you all the information around the process. It takes you back to that process script, and then it gives you all the information around that process. So what we've done so far is we've just tried and understand what's happening in the model. I know what the model does. I know what each of my cube does. I know the number of dimensions which are there in the system. I know which dimensions are manually maintained. I know which dimensions are maintained by a process. I know what sort of chores, what sort of TI processes are running in the system. So the first bit which I've done is just gathered information around the model. Now the next bit which I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze this information. I know I've got a financial cube. I know I've got a profit and loss cube, but I want to understand whether the financial cube is performing well, whether there is a feeding issue, whether we've missed something in the model. So now the next part is understanding and analyzing this information, and that is this system out here. So the first thing which QUBEdocs does is gives you a cube and dimension analysis. Now I am going to take that off and I'm going to see all the cubes. So what this model tells me is these are all my cubes, and in each of my cubes I've got these many dimensions, and which is fair enough. Now why this becomes important is I think TM1 has evolved over the period of time. TM1 became planning analytics. Now it is planning analytics for Watson. A lot of things have changed in the new system. For example, in the past, we never had the concept of virtual hierarchies. Now we talk about virtual hierarchies. But if you look at our old models, we might have had like 10 or 15 or 20 alternate hierarchies in a dimension, which is probably not needed now. All of that could be automated via workspace. We could create a virtual hierarchy and not load the dimension. So it's always good to go through all of these cubes and then look at the number of dimensions. I'm not joking. I'm telling you, I think I did one health check, and that one cube probably had some 23 or 24 dimensions. I still fail to understand how people would analyze that particular cube with 23 or 24 dimensions. And I was speaking to one of my colleague, and then he kind of said that probably one of their clients had a cube with some 40 or 50 dimensions, and then it's just like you trying the limit of a particular cube. But be mindful around the fact, go through this particular tab, look at the number of dimensions which are there in the cube, and try and see whether all these dimensions are really needed, because we've got workspace now, we've got the concept of virtual hierarchy now, we can simplify our models. And that has been our recommendations for many of my health checks across, especially reporting cubes, because we could change the way we do reporting cubes in PA. So that's the first bit here, where you see the cube and you see the number of dimensions. As I mentioned, thumb rule, you can always click into that particular cube and get more information around it. I'm just going to go back. And then the next step out here is dimension and cube analysis. Now, what this tells me is where this particular dimension is being used. So for example, I have got activity which probably is being used in one cube. You can always filter a cube over here. I'm just going to take off all the filters so I see all the dimensions. Then you've got a set type, which is probably used in one cube. Now, why I go through this is I understand which are being used in a cube. So I know that this particular dimension is in use, but there could be some dimensions which are not used in any cube. So for example, PS account, it's not used in any cube. So, but that absolutely does not mean that this particular dimension is a redundant dimension, because as you're aware, in PA we create a lot of dimensions which are like shadow dimensions. We probably do not use it in any cube, but then they're still important because probably they're a part of a TI process and we refer it in a TI process. So make sure before coming to the conclusion that probably this is a redundant dimension because it is not used in any cube, always go through that particular dimension and check if it's used in any process or something. But then this gives me a fair bit of idea whether my dimension is a redundant dimension, whether it is used in any cube or not. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast? All good?
Yep, no questions in the chat thus far.
Okay, perfect. So I always come and go through this particular list to understand what sort of dimensions are used in the cube, if there are any redundant dimensions, which probably I have to tidy up. So that's my cube and dimension analysis. Then my next tab is my user and group analysis. And I think this is such a powerful thing. And many of my clients, especially I think before IBM Cloud came into picture, many of our clients used to always ask us, can I get a list of how many users I have in the system, whether we need to clear any users and all of that. And at times it is to get difficult, at times it is to be very boring, because you have to get back into the architect, take the entire list, literally check in groups, check who you have to delete and all of that. But this is such a powerful screen because it tells you the number of users and the number of groups which are in the system. It gives you more details around how many of them are admin users, how many of them have write access, how many of them have read access, what sort of access do they have in each of these objects which are there in TM1. And then the best thing is over here. So it tells you if there are any users which are probably not assigned to any groups. So which means that these users are redundant users and they have to be deleted at some stage. So that is this. It also tells you if there are any groups with no users. So, probably we've created some groups in the past and you want to delete it. It gives you this. It gives you that information over here. So this is such an important tab, especially for being compliant with your licenses, because it exactly tells you how many users you have in the system. Probably if you've added some additional users which you're not licensed for, how many groups you have in the system, if there are any users who are redundant users because they're not associated in the to any cube and or any of the groups and they did not be in the system. So it does give you information around that. And then the other tabs are, you've got a list of all the clients and it tells you what sort of access it has or whether if it does not have any access. It gives you some profile around the groups and the users. So if I have to do admin, it tells me that this is admin license. If I have to do client too, it tells me which group or cube or dimension it belongs to. If now this is a dummy environment, I've not added a lot of information around here. And to be honest, I've never gone into object analysis, so I don't know what it does. But then my tab, which I go to, is this tab, because this immediately tells me whether I'm compliant with my licenses or whether I'm not compliant with my licenses. Now, with the concept of IBM Cloud, things have become much more simpler, so I can understand that. But if you've got clients which are still on premise, probably at times they're not using CAM security and all of that, this becomes very handy. And then I get into this tab, which is model statistics. Now this is effectively a stats cube in the background, which we have in Architect. And so it's nothing different from the cubes which we have in Architect. Having said that, in Architect there are 4 or 5 different cubes and you have to go to each cube and try and find information. Over here you've got all those cubes in one line and it becomes easier to compare, easier to analyze. So what this stats tell me is how much memory has been consumed by my model, how much memory is in garbage. However, what I mainly look at is this section out here, which tells me whether any of my cubes are overfed or whether any of my cubes are underfed, how much memory each of my cube is using. And I can give you a good example over here. I did a health check for one of my client, and there was this one cube which was taking a lot of time. Okay, so what this client would effectively do is they would do a 20-year forecast, and that 20-year forecast would literally take them about 3 hours or something for that entire process to run. Now the client generally never complained about it because he would just run that process probably once in a month after the month end, and then he would probably just run it overnight and then look at it the next day. So he never complained about it, he was okay with it. But when I did a health check with them, and I kind of saw that, in the chores, that this process takes about 1.5 or whatever, 3 hours to run. And that was crazy. So I kind of said, we could probably look into the process and optimize it further. And he was okay with it. When I looked into the process, I think there were three pieces to it. One, that process would feed a particular cube, and that process would go into a particular cube, and there was a very heavy feeder in that cube, and that is why it took a lot of time. So we changed that rules, we converted that into a TI process, and that almost, I think, reduced the time to about 1.5, or I don't know, 1 hour or something. But then still 1 hour was a lot of time. So then we digged further into it, and what we realized was, what that process does is it exports data, re-imports it, exports data, re-imports it. So we kind of changed that. We exported all the data, re-imported it further, and that reduced the time significantly. So it was just that I came in over here, I kind of saw the processes, I kind of said that, okay, it is taking about 3 hours to run that process. I saw a particular feeder, I knew that, this feeder is absolutely bad, and we could literally optimize that solution. So I really like the screen out over here, because it instantly tells me that, probably there is something wrong with this cube, and or probably the cubes below, and you can kind of dig down further as to which is that feeder which is creating such a huge impact. Then you can get into dimension stats. What this tells you is the number of elements and the number of levels in a particular dimension. As I said, please probably be mindful around this and watch out things. Maybe with virtual hierarchies coming into picture, we could clean up a lot of our models in the past. I think it's time that we literally start using all the new features which we have in PA. So so I always go through this, and then look at the number of elements. Like, I mean, when I look at this is crazy. They've got like 94K and 97K elements. Not sure where they've been using it, but yeah. Then you go to process stats now. Oh yeah, probably one tip over here. Whenever you want to run QUBEdocs, make sure that you turn on the performance monitor in Architect, and give it some time for some processes to run and some rules to get fired, because unless that happens, it does not really populate all these stats cube. And because it does not populate the stats cube, if you take a QUBEdocs documentation, it's not going to give you any information around yours. Just for example, like this screen, it's not giving me any information, because while I had taken the snapshot, I did not wait for the performance monitor to turn. I did not wait after I turned on the performance monitor or something. So make sure that you turn on the performance monitor in Architect, wait for some time, let all the processes happen, so that you get enough information for you to analyze. So that's around process set. So what this effectively would tell me is, when was the last time the process started, how much time the process took to run. And this was one of the screens which I generally come in. So I kind of see if there are any processes which take a long time to run, because then there is definitely something wrong with the process which we could optimize, or there is something which probably it's for review. And then you've got a chore stats, which will effectively tell you when the chore is executed. It kind of tells you when was the last time the chore is executed, how frequently it runs, and all of that. I can see a question maybe. Is there a question in the screen?
Yes. So there is a question from Honorbon regarding QUBEdocs supporting any other environments, and that is something that we are working towards. I can let Belinda speak to a little bit more detail at the end if she wants to chime in. But we are rolling out probably later this year QUBEdocs for Hyperion.
Perfect.
Yeah, Ross,
Okay.
that's oh, sorry, I'll just interject there. Yes, so we have like Ross is saying, QUBEdocs on Oracle almost ready to go. The roadmap is to put it on SAP as well, on VPC, or the new version of VPC. And then there's also talk in our lab around Anaplan, to see if we can do that. So definitely we are talking about putting it on other platforms. Hopefully this year Oracle will go on QUBEdocs.
Perfect. Okay, so now that we've analyzed the model stats and everything, now this is the best feature. Okay, this is the feature why I am a big fan of QUBEdocs, I must say. And I think I think I always kind of tell this to Richard, and I kind of joke around it, and I'm fed up with my own joke, to be honest. But that's around best practices in which we always which we always crave for in TM1, and then QUBEdocs gives you an inbuilt guide for best practices, and that is this advanced search option. And I feel this is such an underrated feature. But then I feel it probably has to be somewhere here, but then it's out there, and it's difficult to identify. But what this effectively, if I go to advanced search, what this does is there are all these inbuilt best practices. I mean, few of those best practices which are there in which we could kind of use while doing a health check. So something as simple as using a DMIC statement in a rule file or in a feeder. You know what, if you kind of, for example, select that, and if I just hit search, it'll give me all the rule files which are using DMIX. And then you can always go in and check whether you really want to use a DMIX. Can I kind of replace it with something else? Or something as cool as, I think there is one which I really like. Okay, this one. Processes where we turn off the logging in the prologue, and then we just forget to turn it back on in the epilogue. So something as cool as that. You know, imagine you've got all these best practices just inbuilt in the system, and then all you have to do is just get into it, scroll down over here, see which are the cubes which are getting affected by it, and just make a list of it. So it is such a cool feature. And then the best thing to add to it is you could literally create your own best practices. So for example, if I have to add a best practices, all I have to do is come over here. So say something like I don't know, I'm just adding a random one. Um, so say something like, I'll probably just try and copy the old, that one on the top, something like, I want to identify a scan function in my rule file. So I'm going to say anything in my cube rules, in the raw rule file. If I have anything called as scan, then I'm going to remove that one, and I can save this. And I will say save as. I'm going to say this is involved for model checks. I can say rules containing scan, and then just hit OK. And then I'll hit on search. So if there are any rule files which have scanned, it will just pop up and it'll tell me that this is the particular cube, for example, which has the scan function. So and the best thing is, once you have set this best practices, they are applicable to all the models which you're using in QUBEdocs. So all you have to do is just make that whole repository of your best practices, put in over here, and then whenever you're doing a health check, you just have to run it. So I really love this feature. I mean, this is something which is probably one of the crux of doing a health check. And to get you all more excited, and which literally got me excited when I saw it, is hold on, where is that knowledge base? Oh, sorry.
Oh, we played a trick on you, Raksha. We moved, yeah, the document wiki.
Yeah.
We took partially your advice after a number of these sessions. We broke document wiki out to its own button.
Okay, I've not kind of seen. Oh, okay, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so great. So what we did is, okay, so these are, okay, probably before I tell you why I'm excited about, these are the health check templates which you can kind of create in QUBEdocs, and then you can save it in QUBEdocs. And then any health check you run for any of your clients, you could literally use that template and replicate that template and then put in information out there. So I have created just very standard template, nothing complicated. Now it's not that, and I can go on edit. Now, in terms of formatting, you've got some basic features, which is fine, which works well. You can put in a screenshot and all of that. So you've got all those basic features. So I've kind of created a very basic template for the purpose of the demo, where you put the client name, you put in some background, some information about the client, give them an overview and all of that. Okay, now what I'm getting excited about is, we just saw the list of best practices, right? You can literally embed them over here. So I can kind of go over here and say, I want to kind of embed all my best practices and insert. And now I just want to preview my thing. So if I scroll down, This literally gives me all those best practices, or what has failed out of those best practices, what is working fine. And then the best thing is I can then go down further in it, and literally it tells me which are the different cubes which are problematic, for example, in this case. So, this is such a cool feature, because you've got all your repository, you've kind of created your list of best practices, you just put it in the documentation, and then you literally just click on it, and then it is going to tell you, okay, capital expenditure cube, probably I've got some special characters in one of the elements, maybe I have to replace it or something. So it'll just give me all the information of all the particular cubes or elements which have, or views which have some special characters in it. Also, similarly, you can embed the flow diagram. So for example, all you have to do is again go over here, embed the diagram. I probably want with rules and process flows, and I insert it, and I can preview it. And I think based on my learning, if the if you add an additional cube, this diagram automatically gets updated, if I am not mistaken. So, but effectively you have your flow diagrams over here, you have your entire model diagram. It's not that every time you take a screenshot, put it in a Word document, send it. Then again, the next time, take a screenshot, put it in the document, and then send it. I know it can get boring, but this is, I really like this feature, that you could embed all your diagrams, you could embed all your best practices in here, and then literally send it across to the clients. I think you can also take an export of it somewhere here of this document. Yeah, you can take a print of this document and then send it to your clients. And okay, so talking more about it, you can create a lot of health check templates over here. Then all you have to do is just kind of literally type in text out here, fill in your information, fill in the list of your best practices, whatever you have around user group analysis, log file analysis. You could literally export. I mean, if I come over here, say in the user group file analysis, I think there is an option where you could export information over here. So for example, this tab out here, and then you could embed it in your document and then send it across. So that is around the model check. Now there's another thing which, to be honest, I've not explored a lot, but I have still used it in a few cases, and that's the log file analysis. So like how we did the documentation, you can also analyze your log files. Now, I think log files are really tricky when you want to analyze, because imagine the amount of logs you would get in your log files. You can always get into the server log and try and find it, but we all know how a pretty server log looks. So like you can click on documentation and get the whole list of documentation. You can also click on the log files, and then you can get your log file analysis. Now for this particular demo, I didn't have a log file, but I just have it from some other demo, and which I'm going to show you over here. Now what this log file does is, I'm going to just refresh this just to see if I get some information down here. Just a sec. Just a sec. And I'm going to go into logs. Okay.
It wouldn't be a proper webinar without at least one technical issue, right?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think log files, it is probably still not live, right? I mean, I used to do it, it was always in the beta phase, and only cloud clients kind of had the log file. I'm not sure if it's still
Yeah,
on.
sure. Yeah, so it's out of beta. It is live, but you're correct. So for now, it is only available on the cloud. We haven't
That's the
built it
challenge I used to face. Yeah.
into the on-prem version just yet, but that is also on our roadmap.
Perfect. So what I kind of looked in the log file analysis, onto my left hand side, it would instantly tell me, okay, there are errors in my log files. And then I think what I would always do is go down here Oops, I'll put this on top. So I would always make it a point that I would just scroll down and see which of them are repeating errors, and then you can always search for them over here. So I do not know in this model which of them are repeating errors, but then you could kind of always search for them over here. Now there's one thing why I really liked log file analysis is if there are any errors from a process or something, it is still fine. You can literally identify it because you would have this errors coming up repeating. You could put in notifications and all of that, and that's simple. But I can tell you an example. So for one of my clients, we had this error coming in into the TM1 server log, and that error was that international IBM error, which kind of said Java null lung fung and something something MDX statement. It was that error which no one could ever even imagine. And there was this one client. So once I did the health check for them, and I kind of identified that there is this error which comes into your log server log quite often, which probably I would have never identified if I did not have this, because I can identify some process errors, it's easier, but something like a log error, at times it could get tricky. And that client in the past used to always complain that whenever that client is on workspace, so whenever they used to use workspace and probably a particular subset or a particular tab, at times it would just log them out and it would give them an error. Now it would happen at times and it would not happen at times, that kind of a situation. So when I was doing a health check for them, and that error got highlighted, it was quite prominent because it happened at least in a week twice, or it was repeating abruptly many a times. We kind of dig down further into it, and we realized that the way that subset was created, or the way that MDX was created, was broken. However, we tried to fix it, and it would still give you an error. Then we went back to IBM, we raised the support ticket and all of that, and then it got resolved. But the point to highlight over here is, if it was not this, and if I had not seen that server log element, I wouldn't have been able to identify that this error even exists, because my natural instinct is check if there are any errors in the processes, and kind of fix it. And also there could be some errors which are really simple. So for example, one element is missing, probably it'll be a historical year or something which is missing in the dimension, and that's why the data does not get loaded, because say we've not put an item skip or something in our TI processes. It could be as small as that. It's not impacting the environment, but a production environment, in my experience, in my opinion, is it's always good to be clean. It's always good that it does not have any errors, irrespective of whether it is impacting the system or it's not impacting the system. So even some small things like that, probably I generally get error that not maybe just put an item skip or something, or I've not ignored a few cells in a TI process, and then it generates a whole list of heaps of error, which are not really impacting my system, but I would always like my production system to be clean. So we could identify a lot of these small things during this health check. So I would always go over here, go through the list of errors, search for any repeating errors, and find out what the problems are. Then what I would do is, I think it is this tab. Not this. I think it is one of these tabs, but which I generally go in. Yeah. So over here in the key metrics, it tells me how much time my server takes to start, which version of TM1 or planning analytics they are on. And below over here, I know I don't have information over here, but then it tells me how many times a user has logged in, if there is any user who is not logged in, if someone has changed the dimension, what sort of chores have been executed, what sort of processes have been executed. Now, this becomes very important, especially because to kind of manage that audit trail. I know we do not really have a very good audit trail in TM1, but this literally tells me if someone has changed the dimension, who is logged in into the system. So I kind of get over here to understand that. And something chore history and process history, this effectively just tells me when the chore was run, how much time the chore took in to run. So just some basic information, and it'll tell me an average time of how much it took to run. If something is taking a lot of time, then probably it's for review. So that is what I effectively do in the log file analysis. There's one thing which I would like to say is what really worked for us during that time is, yes, we did give them a recommendation document, but then we also kind of put in simple recommendations, something like, you've got these 10 list of items which you need to tidy up. Let's go and tidy up these items. It'll probably just take me 15 minutes. You probably want to do this report, or probably in this report this MDX is broken, let me go and fix this report. So all these small things which eventually probably would be a 10-hour work or a 40-hour work, but all these small things really worked in our favor, because client was like, okay, fine, it's just going to take 30 hours. Okay, let's just get into the system and do it. Oh, you want me to do an upgrade, but I don't have the budget now, I don't want to invest now, let's park that later. So it was a mix of big things, it was a mix of all these small things that really worked for us. And the client could then prioritize, okay, these are the list of 3 things which are really small, it's going to probably take you 40 hours, let's do this 40-hour work and finish it off. And that's how we kind of got 10 hours of work this week, 20 hours of work this week, 30 hours of work that week. And that's how we kind of went through that phase and started getting work, and then eventually things went well for us. Yes, that's from me. Any questions so far?
There's a few questions that have popped up, which is great. Thank you very much. Sorry, Ross, did you want to take it?
Yeah, so there's been a couple that I've been typing answers to. And Todd, yes, for the REST connection, you do need a non-interactive account. That is correct. So, but other than that, I have answered the remaining questions. I will also just say I did put my my email address in the Q&A box, and we can put it in the chat as well. If there's any questions regarding installation steps or features, I'm certainly happy to get on a call with anybody on this webinar and discuss in more depth as well. So feel free to reach out to any of us really. But in terms of QUBEdocs features and functionality, I'm probably your best go-to there. So.
Just so Raksha, there's one question that said, how is the read-only user calculated? Is it reference the client property element, read-only user, or is it searching through each user group, security in cube, dimension, element, cell security?
To be honest, I don't know how it kind of does that. Might be. I think it'll probably be through the client properties, to be honest, but I don't know how in the background it does that.
Yep. And
Maybe Ross, you can.
yeah, I wasn't sure honestly, so I responded to Todd and said I'll have to check with Scott on our dev team and get back to him on that one.
All right, so we're right on time. Thank you, Raksha. You're amazing. Thank you so much for openly sharing in this community. I know we compete in some ways, but we also don't. So I really appreciate you spending this hour with us, taking us through, and just so sharing with us. You're amazing. Thank you very much for that. Everyone joining on the call, like Ross said, reach out if you need a snapshot done. If you need any help, we're here to help. We're here to support you in whatever way we can. Hopefully, this was quite useful for everyone. We will share the recording and hope it was useful. So send us some feedback, and I hope everyone have a good morning, night, or whatever time zone you're in. And thank you so much for joining us this morning our time. Thank you, Raksha. Thank you, Ross.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. See you.